Oh, I can't find it. Anything you be makes no sense. Find a search bar either in my phone.
Okay, it's been 5 minutes. We'll go ahead and get started. Time is 5:33 and we'll go ahead and begin our comprehensive plan workshop. And at this point, I will turn it over to Mel Foster and Alonji.
Thank you, Commissioner Bryan, Commissioner Crowe. Wonderful to see you. Jenny and Tracy, as always, thank you for having us. I'm Abby Russell. I'm a communication specialist with Mel Foster Alonji.
Seth Otto, principal with Mel Foster.
And we are here to talk about a couple of items that we discussed at the last meeting and a couple of items that we haven't discussed. So we've got some new content for you today. So we'll go ahead and get started. So as always, we'll walk through the April findings. We're going to talk about what you would like us to look at in June, which is the final workshop, before we begin to put together the report. And then we'll talk about next steps and finish up. Just as a reminder, this is kind of where we are in the process. The STAR is where we are currently. So we're at the May Commission workshop. And as mentioned, we'll have one more in June at the Marina. And then we will be developing a report with a delivery in September, but possibly earlier, depending on how that goes. So as a reminder, the priorities that we discussed for this meeting are Blue Mountain Station and housing, which are actually linked together. Workforce, which we were hoping to have for April, but unfortunately couldn't get a hold of Michael Gaffney at WSU and get in front of him. So that is coming here at this meeting. General economic development, which is a new topic, and then future funding opportunities, which we did discuss in April, March, April, yes. So we'll jump right into workforce development. So a couple of meetings ago, if you recall, the question was raised of what about a WSU extension to help with the workforce, to help develop the workforce to, training. There's all kinds of things that WSU extensions do. Wanted to understand a little bit more about that. So as you know, you have an extension office here on your main street, Columbia County. They have 4 distinct programs. They have a 4-H program, which I understand is pretty active, an agriculture education and research program, a gardening program, and a natural resources stewardship program. So, and those are pretty common across a lot of the extensions that we looked at. However, as we talked with Mr. Gaffney, who is the director of the Extension Services Program at WSU, extensions are really diverse. They look very different depending on the community. And so there are usually kind of a framework that they work from, but the programs can be what is specific to that community and what's needed. And that was something we talked a lot about, which is demonstrated need for programs that are unique to your community and your county and support the needs of your community. And extensions, it's basically extending the resources of this land grant university into the community. So they tend to focus on the land and agriculture, which is a great fit, of course, for so many of our communities, but particularly for Columbia County, as deeply steeped as you are in agriculture. Funding is key. I feel like it's always key. But as of July 1st, when the new budget hits, they will have another 6% cut in funding. And so he did talk a little bit about the fact that, counties and states and the federal government all contribute to extensions in different ways. It can be dollars, it can be in kind, but that continues to be a very key part of the puzzle when you're partnering. And then we talked about return on investment. So what do counties, states, what does the federal government get by investing in extensions? And the return is roughly 3 to 1. So for every dollar that's invested, roughly $3 comes back to the community in the form of commerce, jobs, direct and indirect, induced economic activity. And there's a lot of volunteer opportunities that can also be training for students as well. So there's a lot of hands-on work that students can do that can help train them up. So those are that's the kind of the big picture that we gathered from our conversation with him. I'll go into the recommendations, but before we walk through these a little bit, I want to say that he was very interested in learning more about the unique needs and potential programs for Columbia County. There are programs that are related to WSU that I'm still a little unclear as to whether they actually go through the extension or not. So the WSU Bread Lab is one example that we've talked about. Very, very cool. I'm still not quite clear whether that's part of the extension or if it's actually a separate program. So I don't know if there's just a couple different ways you can slice it. But completely accidental. But I mean, it's dinner time, so I'm not sure if there are different ways you can approach a program like that. But it's possible that, that you could maybe spin off a program. Coordinating with your partners is, of course, a really important part of this, to both understand what there is existing in the community and what resources you do have and how the extension is interacting with other partners in the community. What is the level of interest for additional funding and additional programs? Like before we bake the idea, we have to see if, I'm sorry, I can't stop. You have to see if the recipe is any good. There's even interest. And value-added agriculture was something that we talked about, and that you're seeing that in a lot of communities now with the extensions. Then the next step would be to build the case for the need in the program that's unique to your county. And then Mr. Gaffney said he was very interested in having more conversations with the board and the county about what this could look like.
Yeah, I can't figure out if it's the issue extension either. It does not.
It doesn't say.
It does not say.
The further that we started, when we learned about this, it was really, really fascinating, by the way. If you do get a chance to talk with him, he's been in the program a long time and been running programs a long time, has just a wealth of knowledge. But beyond that, I started looking at all these different programs in these different counties and communities and thinking, are they the extension or are they not part of the extension? And sometimes it's hard to tell. Yeah. But very interesting. WSU is interested. Another thing I wanted to add too is, and this is in the memo, funding can look very different too. So there are some creative funding avenues that they've used. So some entrepreneurial funding avenues where businesses in the community put in dollars or in kind to try to support programs that then support them back. So there are a lot of different ways that you can go about the funding piece as well. Any questions or further discussion? Anything else you'd like us to dig around in there?
I don't. Thank you.
I think it's very intriguing. I like the idea of the 3 to 1, return on investment back into the community. This seems to be a pretty good return, because a lot of things you put money into it just goes away. You never see sign of it again.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting too.
I think it's definitely worth looking into further. And
Great. Okay. Oh, and I have to say, go Cougs.
Yay.
I'm a Coug, so.
Me
Oh,
too.
over to you, Seth.
All right. So it's been established in various conversations, regional economists, small businesses, or discussions that the lack of available housing in the region is something of an impediment to economic development. And so evaluating opportunities to create land or find land that's available for housing has led us to look at 7 acres of port-owned property adjacent to Blue Mountain Station. you can see it there. It's highlighted in red. An impediment to developing that to its fullest potential under the R1 zoning classification, R2.
AR2.
AR2, thank you, sorry, I had that off. Is a lack of available wastewater sewage line connection to and through the site. But the good news is that we've just very recently learned that the city has an option on the property outside of town that would be suitable for the location of the new facility. It's you know, as we learned, it's overdue, given the age and condition of the existing wastewater treatment plant. And conveniently align the main line connecting that new plant and the city of Dayton would assume license to access part of the railroad right of way, so it would run adjacent to port-owned properties, allowing for connection and hookups. So
Yeah, and we have a lift station at Blue Mountain Station now because in order to connect the two new buildings, we had to run a line uphill across the front of that church property under the highway, connect to this industrial park. And they're saying they believe that we could eliminate that and it could be gravity fed, well, our existing buildings. And then would be, available for the rest of the site. Seth got to come to the meeting today, so he's already heard this. But yeah, it was very interesting. It was great. I mean, it was like the best news we could hope for, so. And they were very positive about connecting to city services. Yeah.
that's good news. Yeah. So next slide. Oh.
Is there anything more you wanted to add there, Jenny, or talk about?
Well, are you gonna talk more about housing on the next slide, or was this it? Okay. So that site, if it were, it's a little over 7 acres. The zoning allows as small a parcel as 7,200 square feet, which is a city lot. So if there were no roads or anything, just divided into lots, that would be 42 homes. But another piece I wanted to share, I shared with them earlier today, is that I just had a meeting with the regional economist and we were going through some census information, and she pointed out, this is something we already knew, but she pointed out that we have 85% single family homes in Dayton, 7% apartments and 7% mobile homes. And the state average is 26% apartments. Even Walla Walla, which is lame in the housing department, has 17% apartments. And Assotin County, I think, was 13. So we need apartments. And so there would definitely be some sort of mixed use look at that kind of
Right.
development, because it's, and workforce housing, not low income housing, but workforce affordable for workers, workforce and other housing. So it's kind of exciting. It's kind of an exciting idea, and I have not looked at it yet. I don't know if it can be part of what we finish out with this research, but some of the new funding that came out of the legislature for infrastructure or housing.
We're gonna talk about
Okay, good.
some of that
Okay.
next. Yes.
Well, and with the apartments and other, multifamily units, it would increase the density.
Yes,
so you'd
even
have
more,
than
right,
42 units
Yep.
possible.
Yeah.
Which would be.
Yeah,
that's exciting.
definitely, right. Mhm.
You're gonna
Yeah.
look at Walla Walla on Isaacs, all of those apartment buildings there.
Yeah.
Whoa, that is.
Yeah, and there's still, there's still have more they're gonna build to try to meet the demand.
With your proximity to Walla Walla, you could potentially attract some people who want to live outside of town.
Mhm.
Because it's commutable.
Oh, yeah, a lot of people.
Or people that work here
Mhm.
could not live in Walla.
Mhm. Yes,
Better yet.
Yeah.
mixed use, that was the term that I was trying to
Yeah.
remember,
Yeah.
when we're talking.
Yeah, I think we should clarify that you can't actually technically have mixed use on this property.
What?
Because mixed use implies commercial and retail.
That's what,
So I believe it would have to just be residential.
Oh, mixed use means commercial. Oh,
Right.
okay.
Yeah, that's typically.
But we can be adjacent to our commercial.
adjacent
that's
to
what
commercial, right? Yeah.
Feeds the port
Yeah,
purpose.
yeah.
Okay,
So that's what I was kind of leading to when I
Okay.
was chatting with you too.
I was
That I thought it
thinking-
had to be close adjacent to, or how far apart was.
It's a loose term, right? So we often think of mixed use as ground floor retail with 2 or 3 stories of residential above it. But it can be horizontal as well. I mean, they're right next to each other, and that creates a mixed use district.
Okay.
And the reason I bring that up is because that was what the public ports attorney said. Ports are using as a reason to build housing is because it's has a commercial element.
An eligibility.
Yes, so
That is being
the,
met.
the rest of the site, the food park has to be that commercial element, or we should strongly consider using that as part of our purpose in
Mhm.
looking at housing.
I think you can accommodate that through design and layout. So ensuring that the circulation connects the two.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and there's a lot of pathways, right, for a port to invest in something like this. So is it working with a developer that wants to do something that meets your needs and your vision, right? Is it working with a nonprofit like the Port of Bellingham did?
Oh, yeah, like the common roots.
Yeah, so there's just a lot of different approaches to development.
Right.
Right.
That's exciting.
So at the last meeting, we recommended that the board consider including a funding strategy component to an updated comprehensive plan. This would link priority actions with available funding sources. It helps in terms of planning and prioritizing, organizing, and timing, essentially making sure that you're out ahead of grant funding, funding cycles, working with the funding agencies, making connections with the staff that are working on it, agencies. So this would be a new element to the plan, but we think one that helps make the plan more actionable and implementation focused. So, identified priorities, you link them with the funding, and you can prioritize the timing of those actions around the availability of funding.
It would also be good for succession, because I have an awful lot of this stuff in my head. So it would be good to have that written
Getting
down.
this stuff institutionalized is hugely important. Yeah, yeah. So, commissioners, you're looking at a few examples from other boards and communities where we've put together, we call it a matrix of the funding source, and at least one of these, I think, is organized around fit. So is it the right, fit in terms of eligible activities, competitiveness, and the link to timing and priority of court actions. So what we would recommend is something that is like this, a living document that can be updated, that can be revised as priorities change, as can new resources come online. And it provides basic information, and then it's searchable, doesn't need to be a huge document. Straightforward.
So once, if we created one and then adopted it with a comp plan update, can it be changed, or can only be changed if we're doing another comp plan update?
Well, that's a great question.
Yeah.
I don't think it has to be necessarily part of your comp plan. Right, like the 2 documents can be linked without it being in there, so that every time you need to change that information,
Yeah.
you don't have to go through an update, but at the same time, since it's not, it's simply basically a list of assets or resources and not port assets that you're physically changing. I don't see any need.
Okay.
If it was an appendix.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I think it's important to do it while you're going through that process so that you're linking the priorities up with the funding.
Right.
Resources, but it doesn't
Yeah.
necessarily mean something you adopt, it becomes a chapter.
Yeah, a few years ago, when we did the comp plan, I did that, was adopted, like the Blue Mountain Station Development Agreement, the Economic Development Plan, the SEDS list, all that stuff as part of it. And then realized that that was a mistake,
Yeah.
because those things
Yeah.
change.
Right.
I asked somebody, I can't remember who, some expert, but. So now I think I refer to them in the comp plan as reference documents.
Yes.
Or something, I think is the word. So they're still there and still kind of part of it, but they're just reference.
I think that's the way to go, because I wouldn't even want to have that concern
Mhm.
about, well, I've got to change the funding strategy. Does it affect something?
Yeah.
Right.
Sure.
Right.
So is this something you will work on? Or is this something we work on as part of our comp and update? A matrix.
I mean, I think it's best if everyone's involved, probably, yeah, but,
Okay,
it definitely is something we can do, yes.
okay,
I mean, in these examples, what you're looking at is work that MFA's done to research and organize and then work collaboratively with staff and commissioners to organize and prioritize.
do you have them for other ports already in existence, that exist?
This is one.
Is this a port?
This is a city.
So we've got,
That's good city, yeah, these are
little
cities,
cities, we're working on one for the Port of Richfield. They've not, it's not formally adopted. I think of other, Rock Island is,
Douglas County,
Douglas
West
County.
Douglas County, actually, and Douglas.
yeah. Is
Okay.
I'm not, it's familiar, that's something I'm not working on, is that a port?
no.
No,
Rock Island, or
Mhm.
that's a city,
it's the city, okay.
but the port of Douglas, when it was in existence, was a partner
Okay.
in the
That's
Rock
right.
Island work. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
I think it'd be a useful tool. I think there's a lot of benefit to having a document like this that is a living document that we can refer to and make sure we're following the right line and getting it from the proper sources.
Well, a great reference tool.
Yeah.
But I would think is all in your head, Jenny.
a lot of it is, a lot of it is, a lot of it is, yes. Maybe not the math required, but the program is in my head. Yeah, yeah, and that we could, for ours, we could have the local foundations, you know, the private funding that isn't public, since we use those quite a bit. Everybody does. Ah,
Oh,
you forgot my nose.
Did you?
I think I did.
That takes some.
That takes some skill. It's okay,
Not everyone can do that. That's right.
Okay, awesome.
All right. Anything else on the funding strategy?
Okay, so I think that's the basic gist.
All right, general economic development. Nice. Another nebulous topic. So what we tried to do with this section in the memo and in the PowerPoint here is to summarize kind of the first steps or the big chunks, if you will, of beginning to understand your role and how the port can support general economic development in its county, since you're a countywide port. And beyond, honestly, because it really stretches, you know, to the region. So just to sort of get to basics, so ports participate in two main ways in economic development, programmatic and brick and mortar investments. Programmatic is programs, right? So these might be loan programs or grants or, and it's not necessarily the port granting, although some ports do that. It's working with partners in, you know, usually at the state level, sometimes the local level, to create programs that support economic development in the community. And then brick and mortar investments. We have a picture here of Blue Mountain Station. That's an example of that kind of investment. Another example would be, you know, the infrastructure it takes to develop a site. There's a lot of different ways that ports invest in brick and mortar. One of the most important things there's two pieces here that are just stand out to me at this stage that I want to bring out, and that's data driving the understanding of the current economic picture of your county and your region. So we hear a lot in our communities, right? And it's all great because I think it takes both the unofficial kind of, you know, information that we get in our community, but we have to have the data so that we really understand where we're coming from and where we're going. And you can get that in a number of ways, and we outline those in the memo. But some of the ones is like the Regional Economist. Commerce has tons of data. You can go way back and look at trends and you can slice and dice it. Local economic data. So as the ADO, you probably have a lot of this stuff already, or a lot of information available to you as the ADO here in the county. And other, you know, if there are economic studies that have been done by the region, those are great sources as well. The other piece, I'm gonna skip ahead for just a second, but the other piece is communication. So as a communication specialist, of course, I'm a little biased, but I would say that communication is key in all stages of general economic development. So talking with your community and your partners about what is it that our community needs. Talking with businesses, asking them directly through a survey or other means, what do you need? Do you want us to leave you alone? Do you need money? Do you need more workforce? And what are the issues confronting us? And all those different segments. Talk to your community about why you're asking and why you're doing what you're doing. And then helping the community understand what it looks like when the port is doing economic development. So those are two pieces that I just want to press on here at the start. And then in the middle are understanding how what you have, what you're capable of doing as a port, the assets that you currently have, and the investments you're planning to make, how do those match up with those needs that you're hearing about, right? And that you're seeing from the data picture. There are keystone documents that you can rely on to help keep track of all of that. Your comprehensive plan as it exists today. If you have a strategic plan, also the strategic and comprehensive plans of your partners, right, in the community. So the city, the county, other ports in the region, if you're kind of working together, economic development organizations, those all feed into a strategy. And then of course, community input, as we talked about. I'm gonna pause there. I just said a lot of words, but I want to make sure that you don't have any questions or thoughts before we keep going.
That just triggered a memory from the last meeting. Jenny, you had said that you were going to be sending out a survey to the community.
That I've been thinking about a survey, yeah, and I've talked to them about it, you know, asked, I guess we haven't finalized anything because I told them it wasn't a rush, but
Right,
yes, we have been discussing what it would look like to send a survey out to the businesses.
okay,
And we've talked about how do you do that? How do you get it to just be businesses who answer?
right.
How deep does it go? And so,
Defensible data, right? So
Right,
not
so-
getting a lot of
right.
inputs.
So they haven't finalized anything for me, but they are going to come up with an estimate for what it would cost for them to help with that. And a part of it would be, I guess, we just really need to figure out what we want to do. You know, if you send it to every household, then you get people that aren't businesses answering, so. Or do we want more information than just from businesses? We need to figure that out,
Mhm.
but I would like to, I think it's time, yeah, I think it'd be a
good
really good
idea.
thing to do, yeah.
Mhm. Information that could be included when you're talking about other partners in the community and
Yeah.
what they feel is a goal for the
Mhm.
best of us.
And what they need the most, you know,
Right.
workforce, childcare,
Housing.
more tourists,
Yes.
whatever, housing. Leave me alone, whatever it is. I don't need anything. That's okay.
I think it helps to, whenever I'm thinking about doing a survey, and we have people at MFA who do these on a much more regular and technical basis than but I always try to think about what is my goal? Like, what do I really want out of this, right? And what I want to know is X, Y, Z. Okay, so then I'm going to choose my audience and my method, my tool, and my questions to make sure that we're gathering that information, but also give them a chance to just tell me. You would not believe how many different ways you can put out surveys that allow you to do that, but also have some control over the inputs, because that's important, right? Because you know, it's so easy to just blast out an email, but the problem is that email gets sent on and on and on, and the results get diluted. And so you really have to think strategically about what you're trying to accomplish and who your audience is.
Mhm. Yeah, I'd sure like to know what the community thinks. It's unfortunate that there aren't more people who have come in and commented on what we're doing. And, you know, I just sent out a message a couple days ago to a circle of friends. I said, please tell us what you want.
Yeah, right,
What are your thoughts?
yeah.
Okay.
It's hard to get folks to engage. You know, we toyed with when I worked at Port of Vancouver, and one of the challenges is that we can't give public funds, right? So that's a challenge. But incentives for people, those work. WashUt does it. I know WashUt, they do like $5 Starbucks gift card or
Oh.
you know, some kind of little, just very small incentive to get people to participate. We worked for a city a couple years ago, City of Medford was doing a vision process, and it was a very small incentive, but basically you got entered into a drawing, and it was like, you know, 10 tickets to the local movie theater or something that really fed the local economy. Yeah, that can help. So I talked about some of these, but you know, looking at the data, identifying the inputs and outputs that are driving your economy. Identify those challenges that the port has a nexus with, right? Which is a lot. It's a lot of things when it comes to economic development. There are a lot of best practices and folks out in the port industry who've done some creative things. What tools are they using? What issues are they seeing in their community, and how are they working with their partners? I mean, Jenny, you have a wealth of knowledge and so much depth in this community. But there are also great ideas that you hear, right, at WPA, like, holy, I never would have thought of that. It's really fascinating. And they also can talk about tools that they're using, right? Because that's another thing that is constantly changing, is what are the tools available to ports? And that's another great place to look at. As mentioned, there's a lot of information out there to give you a clue as to where your partners' heads are when it comes to economic development and where they want to go, because it's always, I believe, very important to have some alignment with other agencies. Is just like, you know, the city, how are they going to invest in wastewater, right, infrastructure? What does that look like? What does that look like for the port? How do you partner? And how does that then support the greater good of the community? And then again, engaging your community and interested parties. It goes both ways. So it's like, tell us what you want, but also let us tell you why we're doing this and why it matters. And these are your tax dollars at work. Talk about return on investment. Ports have some of the greatest ROI of any agency out there. And so sharing with them, this is part of our job to use your tax dollars wisely. Other questions, thoughts, things you'd like to see a little more of as we go forward? Great, yeah. Thank you for the opportunity to share some information about that. So I think you have a ports guide, right? The ports
I
guide.
do, yep,
Yeah.
yeah, and I think I gave you each one, the book.
Yeah, there's a whole section on economic development that, it's funny because, so Jim Darling, I don't know if you knew Jim, yeah, he worked with us for years, and before that was a port executive. You can hear his voice pretty strongly, but in the very beginning, there's a quote that I think sums up economic development very well. I'll let you read it, but it's from a comedian, and basically talks about like, the economy goes up, it goes down, and like, it's hard to understand. And so it just helps make some sense out of like, how do we participate as ports and what does it look like? So you might check that out. And there are some great tools in there too. So, you know, things like industrial development districts and, you know, I'm trying to think of other tools from eluding at the moment, but there's a lot of different tools that are available, just at the state level.
Jim Darling was executive director at the Port of Bellingham when I first started. He was so helpful and kind to me and other young, you know, new port people. And I've learned a lot from other ports, so much from other ports, you know, they really do. They really are a supportive group.
That's one thing
supportive
about, yeah.
infrastructure.
It's great because the port, you know, port industry is kind of funny because it's government, but it's also business. And so it's a really
Yeah,
interesting
it's a hybrid,
blend, which can be kind of confusing, but the great thing is that I think that the Washington port industry particularly, it's large, right? It's very big. And everybody sort of feels like a rising tide lifts all ships. And so they share best practices and ideas and tools, and it's pretty great.
So when you would be looking for those best practices, you know, in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, Columbia County is a small county, so would you only look at ports that have, you know, are from small counties? But then not necessarily, because, you know, in some communities, they can bring in an industry that has never been considered. I mean, like Blue Mountain Station, for example. I
Yeah.
mean, you know,
That's an example.
yeah,
across
that
the
is
state
an example.
to all ports.
Right, so I guess it's not just limited to small ports, but
It's kind of limited to what fits our community and what
Yeah.
we need, you know.
Right.
Yeah,
The tax structure
Yeah.
is another, like,
Yeah.
that's another piece, like, I'm trying to think of examples, but like. You know, an industrial development district might not make any sense whatsoever for
Sure.
your
Mhm.
community, but it might make great sense for, I don't know, Everett.
well, and in my time in economic development here, I've been through 3 recessions. The one right after 9/11, which wasn't very long, but it was a clear year of difference in the data I followed. And then, of course, 2007 and 8, and you know, that hit Dayton later. And that was the one where the Washington Public Ports Association said recessions are a good time for ports to develop. You know, because you're thinking everybody's pulling back. They said that's a good time to get things done, so that when the economy comes back, you're ready.
Mm.
And that was when we did Blue Mountain Station. That's
And,
when we did the
yeah,
infrastructure and the building, and so it was ready in January 1st, 2014.
and it's super efficient
Yeah.
with tax
Yeah.
dollars too, because
Yeah,
costs are down.
it was just such a great piece of advice, you know, that I never would have thought of myself. I would have thought the opposite, pull back, you know. Yeah, so.
Okay.
I learn a lot at the port conferences, you know, they're just always very inspiring.
I agree.
Their committees are starting back up again.
Yeah.
So for a while, they had a number of committees that were pretty strong for a long time, and they sort of fell off for a while, and they were quieter, and they didn't even meet for a couple years, I would say. But those are starting back up again, so if you have any interest whatsoever and you attend those meetings, I really recommend the committees, because I feel like that's where kind of the rubber meets the road as far as these ideas and, you know, things sports are doing, and, you know, like, just an example, a policy change issue in a certain, you know, economic development, or because they have ECDEV, they have environmental, they have communications, they have marina, airport,
Legislative,
legislative, yeah, government relations, broadband. I mean, there's just tons of committees, so, it's really, really good to be involved. So the last 3 priorities that we've not talked about are Lions Ferry, which we are going to be looking into that for the next meeting, not a coincidence. Rock Hill Industrial Park, which we talked about, we touched on that a little bit at the last meeting, feels like everything's kind of built out and it's good to go, so don't know if we really need to address that one. Okay. And then sale of port assets, that was kind of broad, so I'm not sure if there's anything for us to look into there, but wanted to open that up.
But the purchase of port assets.
Yeah, tell us more.
stop, no, I'm just kidding.
But, you know, that was one of the comments that I made, that of course, with Rock Hill Industrial completely sold or developed, I should say developed and or sold, let me put it that way.
Yeah, so that's true, yeah.
That's true. Okay, so once that's done, do we go looking for another piece of tract of land to purchase and develop? Again, you'd have to take a look at your cash flow and see that you have the capability of doing that. But again, you've got Blue Mountain Station, you have a lot of acreage out there
Right.
that needs to be
Yeah.
developed. So is it a good idea to purchase additional land?
Yeah,
You know?
Right.
Or land that's available for in industry, we had talked about, you know, there isn't very much.
No,
land
the
that is
zoning,
owned.
yeah, working on zoning and.
so
Yeah.
maybe it's a question of if the port wanted to purchase land, what would need to happen? Well, first of all, what would it need to be for, right? What would you be looking at doing there? Is it industrial? Is it commercial? Is it what? What is it? And then what would be needed to get you there? That's maybe that's a question. Sure. Is that?
Yes.
A little bit of a chicken and the egg thing.
Little bit, yeah. It's tough, right?
And we need houses.
Yeah.
Well, right, we can only do, you know, we are a small port, so we can only do so much at a time, so it might be that we. You know, when we bought Blue Mountain Station, this industrial park wasn't completely built out yet, but it wasn't far from it.
Right.
And this, you know, it had taken 40 years. It had been 40 years since this port had bought land. So now we've got that, so it does not hurt to have it in your mind, you know, be thinking and maybe planning, like she said, what would it take? We know that there's very little industrial land. So maybe what would be a good use of our time would be to work on zoning, work with the planning commissions and figure out,
To zone other land.
you
that's
know, talk to them about, because that's their job. Where are you going to zone more light industrial or industrial land that is adjacent to services, that isn't out in the middle of nowhere.
Right.
Yeah,
So I failed to mention this earlier, but we had an opportunity to speak with Commissioner Bryan and Commissioner Crowe this last week. Thank you both for your time. I really look forward to speaking with Commissioner Watts, hopefully, and get his input as well. But we talked about this a little bit, Commissioner Bryan, you know, there are possibilities, right, within, the community. And so it's a question of, you know, what could those possibilities be and how do we move forward if we want to do that? What are the pieces? And I know, again, it's tough because without knowing what exactly we want to do and what those possibilities may be, it's hard to figure out those steps, but we can talk generally about some of that.
I really like the idea of potentially having, you know, more fringe commercial / light industrial, similar to West Rock Hill, because we get so many requests for, you know, tenants for that kind of property, that it would be nice to be able to have something to offer them, you know, it's just a matter of where do we find it? I don't want it to be ultra limited and not be able to go a little bit more industrial, you know. Because the fringe commercial, you're kind of restricted on how industrial you can get,
yeah,
aren't you?
no, I agree, yeah.
It'd be nice to be able to do a little bit more, not super heavy industry, but
Yeah, the city's the city's zoning is, there's really not a whole lot in between industrial and then fringe, it's just industrial or fringe commercial.
right,
I guess they consider fringe commercial kind of light industrial, but then it goes on to Main Street, which does not, that doesn't make sense.
No.
You know, that's really more fringe commercial. So yeah, it would be a good exercise. There may be land down in this area, I don't know, you know,
Right.
there may be spots down in this west end of town off Cameron, they just have to be rezoned. There may be some vacant land or
how long does
some,
it take to do the
housing.
rezoning process?
well, it just depends, I think it depends on the pushback, if there is any, but I think once a year, I don't know, you planner people, once a year,
Periodic review of the comp plan.
periodic review of the comp plan, the counties open it up, or cities open it up and ask, you can request. We can make a request,
Right.
but we, only on land we owned.
Right,
So if it's not a specific request, then it would be more about going to the planning commission and saying, well, and saying to them, what are you looking at your zoning? Here, we think you need to look at other parcels that zoning them differently. So it's am I saying that right? It's kind of two different tactics.
You know, one irony is that this last legislative session, there's new rules have been passed for GMA communities that have to evaluate housing within their community availability of land for housing. So you know, too soon to know how that will impact making land available for employment uses, but it may make it harder to take residential land and rezone it for industrial.
Oh,
Because communities will have to demonstrate that they can meet the need. So
okay.
another wrinkle.
Our biggest wrinkle is that all of our industrial land is out by Lions Ferry and there's no substation and there's no sewer and there's no water. And there's
Yeah, it seems like that should be removed from your inventory of industrial land because it's really not developable.
unless you have big money. Yeah,
Right.
Or unless.
big money,
has
millions,
priorities for investment.
millions. Yeah.
This is also, again, a bit of a chicken and egg, but this could be where the input of the businesses and community comes in too,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because
Yeah.
again, it's like, okay, well, we know what we like to do. But what does our community want and need? And how do those tie together, or do they?
mhm.
Well, I know that, there's, I think, anecdotally, that if we had more buildings like we do in this industrial park, you know, just these kind of, easy to alter metal buildings with a concrete floor and a small office and a bathroom, you know, that's a model that just can't seem to have enough of.
Right,
This is all light industrial,
This is fringe commercial,
fringe commercial.
which is kind of like the city's light industrial.
Okay.
Yeah. And so, yeah, I don't know, I guess you gotta think about that.
Well, the
then,
only
you know.
other, industrial that's closed in is what the county has up by their county shops.
Yep.
That's 20 some acres, but
Mhm.
they talked about doing a justice center jail over there, but is when, or how much do they need for that?
Yeah,
It
yeah,
just
that's
seems like
true.
it's
Mhm.
a large piece of property that's
is a
not being
piece.
put to
Mhm,
its best and highest
mhm,
use,
sure.
you know,
Yeah,
How many acres?
it's over 20.
Yeah.
it has the old labor camp
Mhm.
buildings on it and. You know, so people would always look at that as, well, why can't we make it housing? Well, it's in an industrial zone.
Right.
And it's across from an elevator that's dirty and dusty and gross. And then now the county lets nonprofits use them for storage. Imagine if the evil port came and kicked everybody out of their free storage.
Or,
But that is, you know, that is, he's right, that's where it's zoned light
Or-
industrial.
Is there a
There's another-
significant number of nonprofits that are using it?
Oh, I think so.
All of
I
them?
heard they were full.
Really? I'm surprised.
Stuff.
Stuff.
Or like the chamber has like tents and canopies and
Sure.
stuff, yeah.
I saw it.
Yeah.
I just went there this weekend. Canopies and tables and.
Yeah,
things like that.
it's stuff.
Yes.
Yeah,
which probably got mothballed for 3 years.
and I'm not saying we shouldn't do it because of that.
Yeah,
I'm just
yeah,
bringing that up
No.
because it would cause.
Ruffle feathers,
Yeah.
maybe another obstacle. and-
Or is it an opportunity
Mhm.
to work together with the
Yeah.
nonprofits to find an alternative?
And those barracks don't have any electricity, they don't have any water, you know, they're just not, they're just,
You can build a storage unit at the far end of it
Mhm.
and have an apartment in there.
And that's not an
Consolidate there.
Yeah.
shut them down.
Yeah.
the jail, what was it, a new jail, right?
yeah, Justice Center, yeah.
It's not an incompatible use necessarily. There are at least 2 ports that I know of so Port of Vancouver has I can't remember city or county now, jail work center. It's a county property, but it's surrounded by port property, so they're neighbors essentially. But it's there. And then I want to say Moses Lake has some kind of county or city facility for it at Moses Lake. But is Mike Wren still the interim there?
Who?
Mike Wren?
Interim ward.
Oh, no, that was a Freda.
Yeah, you're saying a name I don't know.
Yeah, I'm blanking on the gentleman's name, that was like all of a sudden. But anyway, it's not incompatible to have a facility like that next to an industrial or.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah, French industrial facility, or French commercial rather.
That just seems like a more direct, shorter path to the solution of a problem than trying to find residential property and getting the zoning switched and proving the need to be able to do that. And it just, is that running into roadblock after roadblock after roadblock? Not that it's not, doable or that these obstacles would be insurmountable, but this might be a faster road to solving an immediate need.
The port was interested, I think I told you guys this, the port was. Seneca asked us if we were interested in the property when they sold it, and we said yes,
Right.
but they had offered it to the county first. And so we said yes, and so we started down the path, that was when there was still the community center,
Mhm.
and then the county said, oh, no, then we want it, and they'd offer it to them first.
Mhm.
Yeah. That was long time ago, I think that was probably before Blue Mountain Station. Maybe. Not sure.
But this would be an opportunity to work with, community partners and other, work with the county to look towards the solution for common problem that
Yeah.
we need to work towards.
Well, it sounds like Lions Ferry Marina, and then the potential. We could talk a little bit about, purchasing port assets and what perhaps might be required, city, county, the zoning, those types of things. Processes. Can you tell us more, Jenny, about Lions Ferry Marina and what you would like to look into there?
Oh, well, we have a facilities plan. And I guess I thought we were gonna do recreation in general, but Lions Ferry, I think, we have a facilities plan and these pull-through RV sites are part of it. So it might be, I want us to talk about, in the meeting, we'll talk about the pull through sites, because we should have a plan, at least a bit of a rough plan from them. But then maybe look at the facilities and the facilities plan and see if there's anything else that we have an eye towards wanting to develop in coordination with the concessionaire. So
Okay.
it's quite a plan. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's
No,
it's
is it
pretty,
online?
it is, it's on our
Awesome.
plans, policies and whatever budgets page
Okay.
where all the other plans are, and it's pretty extensive, yeah.
Do you want us to look at recreation in general at that site since it's adjacent to the park and the river and all of that, or?
I don't know, I don't know, we had talked about, I just don't know. We had talked about, we kind of talked about recreation a little and then we just pushed it off to do it, Lions Ferry, but.
Right. I guess I'm thinking it's an established recreational area.
It is,
It's
yeah.
KOA. They have
Yeah.
their own plan.
Uh-huh.
That Lions Ferry Marina is following. So I don't know that, I mean, if anything, we would have to be in concert with KOA, and I don't know that we need to be doing that.
Well, it's our facility.
No, I know
Yeah.
that, but they already have a plan for that marina.
Well, but we worked with KOA when we did our facilities plan, so that's, it all kind of fits together.
Mhm.
So maybe we just need to review it, so maybe the existing commissioners know more about it. Because none of them were commissioners when we did that plan. So that's a good idea,
Sure.
yeah, just so you can, not that I'm pushing us to do more out there, but just so you know some of the possibilities,
Oh,
because there
it's
were,
light out there.
there were some fun. Well, people would like a swimming area.
Yeah.
And people,
Yes,
we've gone
that's
off, back and forth about the morages. Because if we try to replace them, we will probably never get covered mortgage again, so that's why we've tried to keep them alive. Which is, on the sea dock is challenging.
Mhm.
So there, yeah, there's just things to discuss, kind of
Okay.
in more depth than we've done.
Sure.
That's what I was thinking, but of course, it's your process, so whatever you guys want to talk about.
Yes, please.
Okay,
Sounds great.
okay.
Maybe we can talk a little bit offline, Jenny, about the community input that you've heard and like assets that people are looking for out there. And just so we can kind of keep that in mind. Excuse me.
I don't remember when we have our next meeting planned.
And
But
yes,
yes, we can.
and I know that the Corps of Engineers has jurisdiction.
They own it, yeah.
Yeah, so I'd
They
like
own it, we lease it.
to know more about the extension of that jurisdiction. and we can talk about
Okay.
it. Okay, fantastic. So, yeah, we'll work on these two, and then if anything else comes up, we'll also, try to set up some time with Commissioner Watts, talk with him individually, like we did for you commissioners individually. And then, bring the research and findings on June 14th at Lions Ferry Marina.
Okay.
Sounds great.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great. With that, we will go ahead and close our workshop. It is 6:24.
Wow.
Thank you, everybody, for coming.
Thank
Record
you.
time.
It is, it's record. We're getting efficient.
Yeah, I'm getting better at this.
Thank you, everyone online.